It is. Okay, ready? You got 4 minutes? Here, I'll hold this for you. Ready, set, go!
Okay, starting on framework, they literally said democracy has no terminal impact, and they haven't actually explained that, so they completely dropped the framework impact. Moving on to like the perm, they say it's like only making nonsense, but it's literally the best of both worlds. You have to look at the perm, like how we apply it. They completely ignore our like application of the perm and ignore that. Also, like on democratic structures, the AF literally protects through cooperative federalism. That is how we protect democratic structures. So therefore, we still uphold their framework while still performing ours. Moving on, they dropped a different argument of what is that even? About like impacting voter rights. And voting rights. They totally dropped that argument. Moving on, they said like we're a moving target, and they said like us to choose between like rivers and the Great Lakes. It's literally both because carp are like spreading so quickly. They said like we extended the sliding scale rule. It doesn't do anything. The Trainer 18 shows that Michigan is being screwed over. That is why Trainer 18. That's why we solve, because Michigan is literally being screwed over. And then in the Hannah 17 evidence, they say like prefer this because jurisdictions, like they literally don't actually give a valid reason why, so you shouldn't evaluate this argument. And then like they say like they have capacity, they wouldn't need help. You should look to our CAR 21 evidence that literally post-states their evidence that says you should that they say you should prefer. Finally, our first voters impact calculus, we literally outweigh on probability and magnitude. You can look to our card that talked about carp in the rivers, and they're going to spread. That's a probability. We can see these impacts starting to happen now. The problem is they're going to continue to happen. And democracy is like, they have no terminal impact for democracy, which is why you should value our impacts over theirs. We also win on magnitude because our impacts are far bigger. Because democracy has no terminal impact, that is why you should value our magnitude over theirs, because they have zero terminal impact. There's no reason to evaluate that. Your second voter is the perm. They don't actually address arguments with like anything solid or substantial against our perm, which is why the perm is the best of both worlds, which is why you should be voting for the affirmative today. Explain what the perm is. Because like the perm, we're able to do cooperative federalism and empower the states and then solidify that with the affirmative plan, thus solving four invasive species. And like you can look to our advantage where we talk about setting a standard. I think it is a Hansen 10 evidence where we set a standard and like American biodiversity is the linchpin of global biodiversity. This is going to set a standard that will be applied to other places in the United States and stop invasive species, as well as eventually across the world, which is why that is so significant, and that is your second reason for voting affirmative. Finally, your third voter is an AF and NEC world analysis. If we look at the world of the affirmative, we see the affirmative plan enacted, or the perm enacted, where we empower the states and then solidify solvency with the affirmative plan. Therefore, we're able to stop invasive species from getting to the Great Lakes and destroying the ecosystem in the Great Lakes, as well as taking them out of places where they already are to restore ecosystems and restore biodiversity, and therefore not trigger our impacts. Well, under the world of the negative, they have no terminal impact to democracy. That doesn't matter. But since they're not doing the affirmative plan, we're going to see the invasive carp eventually get into the Great Lakes. And then when that happens, they're going to trigger our impacts of widespread social unrest, economic instability, and loss of human life.
And the counterplan, the federal government,
and
the card.
And the counterplan, because of his cooperative federalism, because of the card.
I would have done it anyways.
Yeah, so just in summary, like the affirmative world, this is why you should be voting affirmative, because the affirmative world is actually solving invasive species and mitigating invasive species. That's why you should not be evaluating the neg world, because they're not actually solving. We're only going to see eventual loss of human life. We're not going to be curbing invasive species. It's just going to mount a bigger and bigger problem, like how it did in the rivers, where they built up their biomass to 97% in the rivers. That's only going to happen again, but in the Great Lakes and eventually across the United States. And for those reasons, I urge you to vote affirmative.
Outsider voter!